Today's guest, Blake Arnold, is a YouTube strategist. He has worked with many channels over 1 million subscribers to help optimize the performance of their videos. He is an expert on the metrics, helping people become better storytellers in their content, helping their thumbnails get higher click-through rates, helping people perform better while staying true to themselves. It is interesting in juxtaposition to my message of soul wealth because I advocate for ignoring the metrics, for focusing on relationships and memories and letting everything else play out. In this interesting discussion, me and Blake find an even middle ground. It is truly a blessing to sit down with a one-of-a-kind, absolute bank of knowledge that is Blake Arnold. I hope you enjoy the episode. Alrighty,
We're
run
live.
it back.
Yes, sir.
We are still live.
So how do you usually like edit your podcasts?
Okay, yeah, I might get roasted by you for
No,
this.
I'm just curious. Yeah.
I don't edit them.
Okay. Yeah.
I trim the very beginnings. Sometimes I don't even trim the beginnings.
Yeah.
And I'll trim the very ends. If my battery dies and there's like a really awkward stop of the camera, then I'll edit something like that. But up until this point, I've refused to edit the podcast for one reason, which is that I am aware it will perform worse. But I believe that if I forever don't edit the podcast, it will build a level of authenticity where it's like, maybe it's a slower growth, but in the long run, people will be like, oh, this guy literally never edits his podcast, so I can trust the conversations, or maybe they feel more raw and vulnerable. Also, I should give the audience some context.
Yeah. We kind of just hopped into conversation here.
Blake is a YouTube consultant. He's also helped a channel gain over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. He's what you could call a social media expert. And we're going to have a really interesting dynamic because with my whole soul wealth, my whole thing with soul wealth is changing the way people measure success from money, possessions, achievements to relationships and memories. And even further with that, when I think about YouTube and this podcast, I think about getting views and likes versus just creating a relationship with someone that's Blake. And Blake is on the side of, he literally gets paid to help people optimize. He gets paid to help people perform better on YouTube, to help people get more views. And so we're going to meet in the middle and create something that is awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, I just want to explain that before we jump into it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Dude, Thank you for coming on. So yeah, you were about to break down the way I edit the podcast.
Yeah, no. So I definitely value that perspective and that way of thinking. That is a strategy, right?
Yeah.
Even though it's more of a passive approach, I think the great thing about that is that you are comfortable with, playing the long game. And there are a lot of people out there. You were talking about developing trust, which is such a huge thing. I think that there is a fine line between whether it's a podcast, YouTube video specifically, like there's a fine line between like over editing your content and in order for someone to click on a video or play a podcast, watch it for the first time and then want to come back again, they have to have that trust, right?
Yeah.
Because if you promise something different or you show that things aren't as authentic as you said, you're not going to develop a loyal audience. And on top of that, I think what's great about that style of going about producing your content is you're able to really develop more of a personal relationship with your viewers. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like they're hanging out with you, right?
Exactly.
Like there's a viewer on the other side of this camera right now.
Yeah.
And it's more of a relaxed kind of hang, but at the same time, you're providing a lot of value. So,
well, let me throw a concept at you that I've thought about a lot, which is the way you edit your videos, you can never go backwards. So let me explain that. Is like, I've chosen to start the podcast, and even with my vlogs, I've chosen to keep the edits as minimal as possible because what I've noticed is when a channel starts leaning into, let's say, beastification, for the audience, beastification would be like the really choppy edits with the punchy subtitles, like basically editing for people with extreme ADHD.
Right.
What I found is that people who lean into beastification, if they later realize that they're not passionate about making that type of content, or if they later want to switch it up, they will face a huge drop-off. Anyone faces a drop-off when they completely switch their niche.
Right.
They'll face a bigger drop-off because they've catered to an audience that has a certain attention span.
Right.
And now they say, hey, maybe I don't want to pay a crazy editor. Maybe I don't want to spend 50 hours editing every video. So they try to switch to a lower pace, but because their audience is conditioned to that faster paced content, they'll have a bigger drop off. Whereas like me, I'm not going to gain as much in the beginning because to watch this content, no edit, podcast 2 hours, takes a really girthy attention span.
Right.
But I can, maybe in the future I make more money and I added a podcast editor and I make it a little nicer and a little nicer. Well, they're already used to this type of content and now they're going to get something better rather than the reverse. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I think when you said, the one thing I disagree with is what you said about there's no way to go back. Like you totally can. And yes, and you said that with the fact that you will lose audience if you do that. I think that it is very important to understand, what is your long-term play and not to kind of pigeonhole yourself in an area where, in the long run, it's not going to be a style of content that you're happy with and or the audience that you want to grow. But at the same time, I also think it's interesting in that every podcast, every video is a new opportunity to slowly start implementing some new things, whether that's faster paced editing or a different style of shooting, a different style of editing. I think another thing to take into consideration is the fact that your audience grows with you, right?
Yeah.
So if you're planning on being online and having this be a career, it's important to stick to what you like at all times, and what you like is never going to be the same from the first video to your 100th video. That's going to change. And I guess the underlying lesson with how you should be producing your content is you want to produce it in a way that you enjoy, right? Because it's not going to be sustainable if you're editing your content or filming your content in a way that you don't personally like or in a way that you grow out of. So it's kind of important to stay true to yourself, and really, I think sustainably, you just want an audience that likes the style that you really enjoy producing.
That's a very soul wealth answer.
Hell yeah.
Have you read The Creative Act by Rick Rubin?
Of course, yeah.
So in that book, something he says that really, really changed me was the audience comes last.
Yeah.
He says the audience, and I'm curious on your opinion for this because I don't know if the metrics would agree with that statement, but what he says is that one thing I love that he says is the single best indicator of if someone else will like something is if you like it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always found that to be interesting as like, wow, I could go and try to see the trends, see what's trending right now, figure out the future, and those things do help. But it's like, if I just create what I like, I'm never inside anyone else's head, so I can't confirm that they will like something. Mm-hmm. But I know that if I like it, that is the best indicator if they will also like it. Mm-hmm. But then he goes on to say, if you're creating something because you think someone will like it, that's fine, but that's not art. That's commerce. It's like essentially if I was doing drop shipping online, I might sell a product that I don't really care about, but it's commerce. And I do almost feel like the consulting YouTube world can be a bit commerce-ish. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a super interesting topic to touch on. So Where do I start?
Yeah.
With it all depends on what your goals are, right? And some people will be completely fine with the positive stimulus solely being, or positive feedback from putting content out there solely being that you had something that you wanted to say and something that you're passionate about, and you said it, right?
Yeah.
And then the other side of it, which this is like literally the complete opposite perspective, or opposite end of the spectrum rather, is I want 1 million views and I'm going to make this content so that I can get 1 million views. Now, where I lay on the spectrum, I would say is somewhere in the middle, right? The way that I personally think about a YouTube channel is that it's a business, right?
Yeah.
But I didn't get into this line of work because of money. I got into this line of work because I'm passionate about art, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting into the consulting world and also just working with various channels that have a lot invested. It's important that if we want to continue to grow the business, if you are putting a video out there that you're investing a ton of money in, you want to see a return on investment, right? So, and I guess that is for people that I've worked with personally. It could be the dollars that you're actually like legit, like liquid money that you're putting into a video, or it could be what you value as your time.
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of depends. But the channels that I've worked with, they invest a lot into their videos. And so, we want to make sure that the video continues to grow. And so when we decide to do a video concept, there are a couple boxes that have to be checked, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first one being, is this something that we're very interested in? Is this something that we're passionate about? Okay, yes, it is. And then down the line, there's like few in between when it comes to, can you package the video properly with title and thumbnail? If it's something that we're interested in, we know it'll be a good video. And then at the end of the line is the box that you check where is this broad reach? Is this broad appeal? Is there a wide audience that's going to enjoy watching this video? And we look at the amount of time, whether it's travel, the amount of money that you invest, whether it's travel, whether it's the time that you spend. And we kind of make a decision based off of where we project the video to perform. So it really is kind of a balance, right? We won't make the video just because we know that it's going to get views. First, the box that has to be checked is that it's going to be enjoyable for the content creator in the first place.
So what I'm getting here is that you won't make a video just for the views, but you also wouldn't make something if you knew it was not going to perform well.
Correct. And that's strictly just on based off of the goals of the content creators that I've worked with. Yeah. Right.
Well, you know what's interesting? On my last podcast, which had nothing to do with YouTube, but it was with an entrepreneur, he talked about the difference between a job, a career, and a calling. And he said a job is like I go get hired somewhere and I make money. And generally, people don't like jobs. It's like, this is my source of income, but I don't like it. A career is essentially a glorified job. It's like, I'm somewhat interested in what I'm doing. I'm making a salary. I'm making good pay. But again, it's like my life is here. My career is here. They very rarely overlap. And he says, a calling is you're doing what you love and you make money from it. So you get to impact people with your job. And I think that's a luxury that a lot of YouTubers get to have. And I think it's why it's the most desired job in the world right now, is that you essentially can make it a calling. Yeah, so it is interesting when I think about that. And something else I've had like an ego or even like pride struggle with is that I don't know if it's because I'm the sole wealth person or just because I'm like, I've never wanted to be like anyone else in anything I've ever done. Like, to the point where like a good YouTube strategist will be like, hey, do you want your podcast to perform well? Well, look at the top performing podcasts in your niche. How do their thumbnails look? How do their titles look? How can you replicate, not copy, but how can you replicate and steal like an artist, Austin Kleon?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be like, refuse to do that just on like the ego of like, I don't want to be like other people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been something that's sacrificed my performance where I'm realizing like I'm actually sacrificing my impact, my calling, and my message to others by not being willing to look slightly like someone else.
It feels impure, right?
It feels impure, but it's all in my head.
Right. So I think, yeah, part of the way that you're putting your angle on that idea could be making it feel more, I guess, dirty or not something that's true to yourself. But if you think about it like this, so you look at of course there's podcasts out there that you really enjoy to watch, right? And you have a taste yourself that you've developed over time.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at more at the angle of what do you like about those podcasts, right?
Yeah.
What aligns with your specific taste that you developed, and then taking little bits and pieces of that and transforming it into your own style. So with the steal like an artist concept, I mean, it's often talked about that originality does not come from completely inventing your own thing.
Yeah.
Nothing is fully original.
Yeah.
Every idea has been inspired in some way, shape, or form based off of the past. Whether that's experiences you've had in your life, just some random conversation that someone has like in a table next to you, or you really enjoy some content that you saw. I think the very important thing to go about making content in a way that is not exploiting others' work and others' ideas is taking that one thing that you like from, let's say, X creator and really making it into your own.
Yeah.
So
I do have a lot to say about this. Something I wanted to make sure I touched on before we moved is like how you were talking about being a consultant for other YouTubers, and when you get hired as a consultant, they're probably not hiring you to see if they're passionate about what they're doing. They're hiring you to get more views, to perform better. And something that I think, where it's like I just brought up that Rick Rubin quote I love, which is like, there's commerce and there's art.
Mm-hmm.
I think though the addition to that quote that I would add is that what he's saying is absolutely true. There is art and there's commerce, but you can be passionate about both. And I think that's like something where it's like, I've almost like suppressed my passion about commerce and business and being an entrepreneur because I'm like, I want to be such a pure artist. And again, it's just like, it's like self-destroying ego. And it's like, I love Patty Galloway. I love talking to you. I love these people who like are obsessed with the details, are obsessed with those features and how to improve. And that is like, it's funny because if you were in the business world, you would be called like, you would just be called like a genius, like someone who's smart by being so like commerce focused. But in the YouTube world, it's almost like we separate the two. And I actually have a friend who has a really good example of like a peer artist. He talks about like dads that come home from their 9 to 5 and then in their garage, they have like their little project they're working on, whether it's like this car that they're fixing, whether it's like some Lego Star Wars or some like woodworking stuff, and they're never gonna put it online. Their wife or kids might see it once a month when they walk out in the garage, and that's art. That's you doing it for yourself.
Right.
The second you put it online, you want something from it, and I don't think there is anything wrong with enjoying YouTube both as art and as commerce.
Right. I think one way that I've been looking at things lately is trying to sit on a balance beam between playing the game, like sitting within, there are confines, let's say for YouTube in particular, of, what are these different things that you need to do in order to be successful metrically?
Yeah.
And then also pushing back on that when you can.
Yeah. When
you're at the end of the day also trying to put out content that has a great story, is pure art, right? Yeah. I think a lot of the time it's easy to look at creators with a lot of views and see it as, oh, they're, using all these hacks and they're really just, it's all a lot of like psychological tricks.
Yeah.
But a video is not going to be entertaining and it's not going to get a lot of views if it's not a good story.
Yeah.
So I always keep that in mind. And I think, like you said, there are people out there that enjoy doing a little bit of both. And I think that's kind of where I sit. I definitely will push back in the edit, like for one YouTuber, my main client that I work for, where I'm not just doing the consulting, I'm helping come up with ideas, producing, filming, editing, all the way through with the strategy. I push back a lot on certain areas, letting it sit for a bit, letting the video play out, because it's an important moment. And if it doesn't have that time, it's going to take away from the story rather than adding to it, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. Let me share something with you that I learned about story. So actually, when I was starting this podcast, I was seeing all the podcast clips, and you'll see clips that have a podcast on the top of the screen, the Mr. Beast text, and then GTA on the bottom of the screen.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang, like if I edited in my videos like this, and it wouldn't be hard, I could find some AI service, I could hire some VA to do it for fairly cheap and have these crazy edits. But one day I was posting a podcast clip on Facebook Reels, and I don't go on Facebook, I'm too young. But right when I go to post my podcast reel, I see a video, it pops up right when I open the app, 50 million views. And it's the worst quality video I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. It's like 140p, looks like Minecraft. And I'm like, how could this horrible quality video have 50 million views? So I watch it. And essentially it's like this dude, and he's sitting in what looks like a game show audience, but he's not on stage, he's in the audience. And then the whole audience stands up and gives him a standing ovation. And he's just sitting there. And then the text explains the story. And essentially what had happened was that guy was from Germany. And when he was younger, he helped all these Jewish kids escape Nazi Germany. And every person in the crowd was a Jewish kid that he had saved. And someone had organized it so that they could give him a standing ovation, thank him for saving his life, even though he didn't realize it. I mean, obviously he realized it after. And I was like, wow, the story is so good here that even though it's the worst quality video I've ever seen in my life, it has 50 million views. And that was another thing that pushed me to not be so jumpy with not only editing the podcast, but also the clips, because I'm like, if I just learn to edit everything so great, then I might be tricking people into watching. But I'm not saying I'm not going to do those things, but if in the beginning I focus on becoming a better speaker and a better storyteller, and I make it about this first, it will probably be a better investment than just editing everything as crazy as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen that video, and I watched it all the way through. Definitely pulls at the heartstrings. It's very touching. I think it speaks to the fact that content is king, right?
Yeah.
You can say content is king. You can say the story comes first, right? And you're right. If you don't, if what you're filming, what you're talking about, what's actually happening on camera, or whether it could be just audio, if that isn't engaging and brings you in and relates to you in some way and touches your emotions, slapping a great edit on top and trying to fix it in the edit is not going to fix it, right? It's not going to make it a great video, a great podcast. And you know, that's technically part of consulting, right? It's not it. We look at things from let's say we're going back to the fact that we won't make a video if we don't think a lot of people are going to watch it. You know, we're making sure that this is a topic that, you know, is going to have room for those moments that really bring someone in and really engage people. So
I have a question. So we're both in agreement that story is king. That's how you change someone. Story is not only how you get views, but it's also how you impact someone and change their life. What can you do for the people listening? They want to be a content creator, they want to be a podcaster, but I mean, you can focus on YouTube because I know that's your specialty. How can you put story first before filming, during filming, in the edit? How do you actually go about that?
Yeah. I think that one way to look at any sort of story is that there's always 3 acts, right? There's the build, the conflict, and the resolution. Okay? That's the most simple form of a story, and then there's the character arc. And with the character arc, this person who's the protagonist goes on this journey. And very traditional in the storytelling world, where that person goes on this journey, he wants something, and there's conflict to getting what he wants, and then he either achieves what he wants or he doesn't, whether succeeds or fails. He comes back to the same place, a changed person, right? So a lot of the time when we're working on videos, it's very important that if it's going to be a great video and it's not just a video that will just pull views for the sake of pulling views, it's gotta, the person that is the protagonist in the video has to have a good why. Like, why am I making this video? Or why am I doing this podcast? And so in your case, you know, you bring on these guests with podcasts, and the first act is kind of like getting into, you know, what is it about this person that's interesting for the audience? What can they learn? And although it's not as like, it doesn't align perfectly with the 3-act structure, by the end of the video, not only do you come to a new understanding and perspective, but also so does the audience. And so you walk away from the video changed in some way, shape, or form.
Well, dude, it's funny that you say this, because I've tried a number of things in my research and my preparation. So at first I started how most people would probably start, is they research a guest and they write a list of questions. What I didn't like that when I did that, I became an interviewer. And I love interviews. I love consuming interviews, but I also love consuming conversations. The difference between an interview and a conversation is, like, generally interviewers change the guest every time. So I would, if in that aspect, I am more of an interviewer. And generally conversationalists have a co-host and they talk about topics rather than, like, I'm not interviewing my co-host every time. So it's like, but there are differences. Like, if I'm watching a Huberman podcast, I might just go scroll through the list of names and then click on the first name that's appealing to me, and it's going to be an interview. Whereas, like, someone's watching Call Her Daddy or whatever, they don't really care who she interviews. They're watching Emma Chamberlain. They don't care if it's alone or who she interviews, because they know the conversation is going to be good. And so that was something where I was like, you do pigeon yourself a little bit into becoming an interviewer when you change the guest every time. But I knew that I wanted to be a conversationalist. So I was like, how do I change that? So instead of writing questions, I started writing topics, which is like, I'm not going to have a list of questions to ask Blake. But I know that Blake's very knowledgeable on YouTube and storytelling. So I'll write storytelling as a topic, and then we can discuss it. We can share and that's kind of where I'm at now. But you're sparking an interesting idea. Is like, I wonder, what if I researched a guest? And this is not something I would do with a guest like you. It would be more of a guest that I'm sharing their story. So someone who has a crazy story, where it's more about like them, their life experience. So what if I researched them, and then instead of writing topics, I literally wrote the story arc. I was like, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 as a podcast. And I don't know. I'm just trying to take what you're saying and like, how would I apply that to my work?
Yeah. No, there's a lot in that. I think one thing that I started thinking about when you were saying, with an interviewer, it's much more like you go down the line, you check off the questions you're asking. And then with a conversation, it's more free flowing, right?
Exactly.
When we're planning videos, it's very important to, and I don't like that I just used the word plan.
Yeah.
But when we are writing out, how we're thinking that a video will go, as far as these are the shots we need, these are some talking points. We come from a perspective of being able to get onto the shoot, and you're not planning necessarily, you're preparing.
Yeah.
Okay. So what that means is, yes, we have an idea for how we want the video to flow, but it's very important to allow for those spontaneous moments, right? Yeah. To allow for whatever comes up, whether it depends on the type of video or the podcast, but to put this in a direction of what you're doing, I think that preparing in a way where you do have those talking points, but then being open to veer off the path into something else that comes up is great. You still have some sort of structure to it, but also you're open to the fact that maybe there's something that will come up with this specific topic or a tangent that will turn into something even greater than I had ever planned for or prepared for or expected. So I think creating structure is important, but also leaving room for those moments that you just cannot plan for.
So I have a question. Like, when you're planning a video, the Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 makes sense to me. So it's like, just for the audience, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but the main YouTuber he works with is Brandon Williams, and he is a fitness influencer. But you would think, I mean, depending on how much YouTube you watch, you would think fitness would just be going to the gym, but they don't stop it there. They'll do fitness challenges, they'll do fitness. There's always a story being told through the perspective of fitness, which is actually quite interesting. I do like a lot of those channels. But let's just say, like, give an example. I did 10,000 push-ups in one day. Whatever. It's like, the character, the issue is the 10,000 push-ups, and then he's going to struggle to overcome it, and then he's going to overcome it. But when you talk about the story arc of the person, of the character, and how they're going to change, can you prepare that ahead of time? Or do you just leave that up, how the video happens, or how does that go?
Yeah. So with the fitness entertainment niche, there's really a lot of opportunity for storytelling, because it's also entertaining, right? Yeah. Like people there are the content creators, at the purest form, it would be like Sam Sulek, right? Yeah. He does a video.
We talk about him.
Yeah.
He's a case study for
sure. No, and I early on when we were talking about, you don't like to edit your videos, I was thinking about him. And people take away something different from him. He has a different value proposition. For Brandon, it's we want people to walk away from the video being entertained and or motivated, inspired to take on being more active in their life in some way, shape, or form. With that, we keep those two things in mind when we're, writing out the story. And when it comes to like planning out the different, let's say, talking points or shots that you want to get, I think depending on not what you say, but how you say it, you're able to really get that story across. So I'll try and think of an example of a video. Okay, so there are a lot of videos where it's much more clear cut as to how we want to write it because we have more control over what happens, right? But there are other videos, like an experience type of video where, let's say there was a video we did where Brandon wore an age suit. It's a suit that makes you feel like you're 80 years old. And his goal, his why at the beginning, and how we originally were kind of going into this, how we were writing it was, he wants to see if he's going to be able to complete his normal daily routine, which is very rigorous, a ton of training, with this age suit on, right?
Yeah.
But as we're filming the video, and this was just one day of wearing it, having that plan in mind, but also being open to behind the camera as I'm filming, how is Brandon responding? What is he thinking while, like, what are our conversations off camera when we stop recording and we go on to the next thing? And one through line that I was getting is the fact that he couldn't wait to take it off and how grateful he was that he didn't have to go through this pain every day of being constricted by the weight of old age, right?
Yeah.
And with that new understanding and new perspective, we then decided to shoot the end of the video in a very specific way, lining up specific shots to really bring home a new message that was learned in how Brandon had transformed through the video. And part of me doesn't want to give away how the ending of the video, but I guess what I would say is we filmed it in a way where it brought a lot of perspective to the fact that it's very important to not take your youth for granted, because one day you're going to wake up and it's not going to be like you're wearing an age suit. You're not just going to be able to shut off this suit. So the end of the video is filmed and put together editing wise in a way where you have Brandon take off the suit at the end of the video. He's so stoked that he gets to go back to his normal self. He's relieved, but then it immediately brings in the idea that one day he's not going to have that choice, that opportunity to just shed off that old age. And so that I guess would be a good example as to how you can really tell a great story and prepare for it. And that does go back to the fact that I was talking about how you can't just go down your line and check all the boxes and every time you're not going to have the best story possible. It's very important to be aware of where things are going and how they're developing throughout the video, throughout the podcast, and seeing if there's a different angle, or maybe not just an A plot, but also a B plot that you can add in there that will then really provide a much more of transformative experience, and really highlight a more transformative experience for the people on camera, but also a transformative viewing experience for the audience as well.
Dude, thank you for such an in-depth answer. That was awesome.
Yeah. No, I'm happy I was able to think of a video that like really aligns with that. Because, there are others that we do that are more public challenge.
Yeah.
it's really straight up. It's like we go in, we're challenging the public, usually Venice Beach, to see if they can accomplish some feat of strength.
Yeah.
Your why is, let's see if someone can do this thing. And throughout the video, there's build and fall from it, and then it ends up being a challenge that's extremely tough. The video only really ends when someone accomplishes that thing by the end, and that is much more like, we know, even though we don't know who's going to show up that day, we're going to stay out there filming until eventually someone does it, and then that's kind of how we have those three acts.
And that one's not like, as you're probably gonna, the end is going to be the fact that someone could do it rather than,
or we break expectation. If we're thinking about, because when I say that, I'm thinking in my head from the like YouTube consultant perspective or just strategy perspective, like, oh, well, the viewer probably knows every time, like, if once this person finally does the feat of strength successfully, the video ends. Sometimes we'll bring in opportunity to break expectation, have that happen earlier, and then introduce an even greater, more challenging feat of strength that they have to achieve. And in that, again, it's not spontaneous. It's like we wrote that out. So they're two very different styles of storytelling, and I think also just intention when it goes into like creating the video.
Interesting. Deciding which angle I want to go from here. I think I want to ask, when you make a video, do you create the thumbnail and title before everything else?
Yes.
Why?
It comes back to the fact that, we're running a business. Every video is an investment. And when you think about the box that we need to check when it comes to, is this going to reach a wide enough audience for us to at least break even on the video? If you have an amazing video idea, but you're not able to communicate it very clearly to the point where someone could have a 0.2 second glance at the thumbnail at the very least, and they don't know what that video is about, then unfortunately they don't have you as the creator don't have the key to bring them into this great video. So for that reason, if that is one of the first things we always think about. And in the past we have just made videos and then thought about the title and thumbnail later, but I think that
it doesn't perform as well.
Yeah, more often than not, especially if it's more of an intricate idea that takes a little more, brain power. And if we end up, and I'm thinking about a situation like maybe a year and a half ago where we make the whole video and then we're rushing to get out the title and thumbnail. It's a tough situation because it doesn't align with the creator's goals really in that case, because, they also, want to, they put in all this time and effort into a video. And the other side of that is, they want to make sure that video can have as big of an impact proportionally to the energy and the effort and the love that they put into creating it in the first place.
Yeah. The fastest growing podcast in the world right now is called Diary of a CEO. I don't know have you seen it?
Yes.
It's a great podcast. It's probably my favorite podcast at the moment. I really love it. And they are so dedicated to, they think about podcasting exactly how you think about YouTube, even extremer. I know something they do is they will create titles and thumbnails, run Facebook ads on them before the podcast comes out, and then based on what title and thumbnail perform the best, he will incorporate those as talking topics into the podcast because he knows what people are most interested in. And then, so he already knows what title and thumbnail will perform the best because he's running ads on them before the podcast doesn't even exist. And then he takes the topics and titles people are most excited about and he talks about them, but it doesn't feel fake. Like, because I'm explaining this and I'm like, dude, especially from a soul wealth perspective, it feels like that could come out fake, but I don't know, the way they do it just feels so elegant and real, and it performs the best. And that's something I'm trying to do as well, is like, and I think it, like, so much of this comes back to my ego and pride, but it's like, maybe even that's a good thing for me to do as a podcaster, is like, like, let's take you, for example. I know, and I didn't do this, but maybe I should have. It's like, I know you're a YouTube expert. I know you know a lot about, like, YouTube knowledge, about fitness videos, and maybe I think about all those things. I'm like, what would I be the most interested if I clicked on you? And it's not like forcing a conversation, but maybe that's the first talking point, and I make the title and thumbnail. And so that if someone clicks on the title and thumbnail, they get what they clicked for in the first talking point, and then I'm making the talking point about you. It's based off of you, so it should be something you like. And then the conversation goes wherever from there. And a viewer of a podcast, someone who watches a podcast doesn't watch it the same way as a YouTube video. They're not expecting to have the flashy cuts so it's like, maybe the podcast goes wherever from there. And if it's a good conversation, they'll stay. But thinking, I like that analogy you have of, like, the key and the unlocked door. I could be sitting out here for 2 hours having a conversation, and I'm happy to do that. And I always think from the perspective of, like, successful before the post button, which is, like, if we create a relationship and we have a good time, then that is a success. But also just, like, if I really think this is valuable for the world, then I want the most amount of people to see it and how to think there first. And I really think this podcast came at such a perfect time for me, because over the past couple of weeks, I've just had this revelation of, like, it's okay to, like, think forward, and you're, like, the perfect person to talk to and, like, really divulge into that message. Hey guys, future Aussie here. If you're enjoying this episode, please leave a 5-star on Apple or Spotify. This helps me get discovered, and it really helps grow the podcast. And if you do that, I will continue to invest in the podcast and make it the best it can possibly be. I do think we should talk about Sam Sulek, so I need to fill the audience in.
Yeah.
So Brandon Williams, the guy he works for, makes these highly edited, very good storytelling videos about fitness. They're like 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah, around 10 to 15.
10 to 15 minutes. And there's this new guy in the fitness space called Sam Sulek, and he makes videos every day or two, and they're 40 minutes long, and they have, like, 4 cuts of video, and it's literally him going to the gym. There's no music. It's a screenshot for the thumbnail. The title is relatively the same thing with a changed date. So winter bulk day 1, winter bulk day 2, screenshot thumbnail, and it's a 40-minute long video. And when I clicked on it, it was like, dude, how could this do, like, it blew my mind knowing, like, the current state of YouTube, but at the same time, like, it does feel fresh, and like, I'm curious your perspective on, like, why do you think he also is succeeding right now?
Yeah.
And he's succeeding extremely well.
Yeah, he's doing amazing. And I think for a lot of people looking at it at first, it was definitely a surprise. You were saying that it feels fresh, it feels new, right?
Yeah, it does feel fresh.
Yeah. So I think if you look back on just a study of what type of content was most successful from the dawn of YouTube to now, things go in phases, they go in cycles. It's the same thing with fashion, right? Like, there was a time where, like, let's say shorter shorts was cool, like all of our dads wore them, and then we were in, like, middle school or whatever, and everyone wore, like, the baggy longer like basketball shorts. And then now it's back to, like, maybe something a little more, or a couple of years ago it was like there's the chubbies, right? And like everyone wore those, and then it went a little more like in between. So I think on one end, I think that from a style perspective, things go in cycles, and people get kind of sick of one style of content, and then when something new comes into play, it's refreshing in that way. But also a big part of the movement of the trend towards higher edited content, where it's very curated, and and there's so much intention down to the each frame in the video on where things are cut. That was definitely accelerated by Beastification or Mr. Beast. His intention wasn't to do that, and he doesn't like seeing all these people copying him verbatim. His perspective on how he views success is building that business as much as possible, making the best video possible, and his perspective on what is the best video possible is a video that performs, a video that has great retention all the way through, super high click-through rate, everyone watches his videos. So because of that, and he's become the most successful YouTuber metrics-wise, a lot of people, the majority of people on YouTube follow suit. And with that, there's this trend, right? Because Sam comes in with this complete switch up, just the most raw form of content where he's pressing record. He throws the different clips together where he stops recording and throws it into the video. He has that, which is new, different from what's out there. He also has a great personality, and he has a just pace of talking and also tone of voice that's easy to listen to for a long period of time. And then also one thing that he does have going for him that I think is a little contradictory to those first points on why he's successful is the fact that his body himself, he is a spectacle. This man, if you haven't seen him before, he's massive. He looks like a gorilla, honestly. And people see that, and for someone, if you think about it from the thumbnail perspective, if you're online and for someone to even discover him in the first place, one of the reasons that they even maybe clicked on the video is because they see this massive dude, right? And they're kind of curious. It catches their attention. But then he's developed a ton of noise around the fact that eventually he'll probably be this very successful bodybuilder, and he's very young. And with that combination of things, plus the fact that he provides a ton of nuggets of value from the perspective of someone who has successfully built their physique in a way that for a lot of bodybuilders is kind of their ideal goal. There's a huge audience out there that, one, wants that knowledge, two, enjoys the kind of hangout, like almost like you're vicariously going to the gym with him type of vibe. And three, I think they also kind of develop this sort of parasocial relationship with what he's doing. I think there's even more that's coming to my mind. I think it's also frequency. So like in the Beast world, right, if you're trying to make the most highly edited, best possible, planning the thumbnail story before filming, highly edit it, if you're going for the best possible product in that way, then you simply can't post the frequency he's posting. He's posting every other day. And so I think when it comes down to almost what we were talking about with the podcast, which is like people feel like they're hanging out with him, it's like if you have like a best friend, or let's say even a girlfriend, you want to see your girlfriend like
2 to 3 to 4 times a week, not like once a week. So it's like it gives people that opportunity to like hang out with them. My best friend that I go to the gym with, he's a huge Sam Sulek fan, and I was like trying to just YouTube analytics, like try to understand him because he's not in my world at all. So I'm like, why do you like him? Why do you watch him? I'm like, what's the appeal? And he's a hip hop producer, so he makes beats. And he says he'll like, while he's making beats, he'll just throw like a Sulek video in the background. But you wouldn't throw a Brandon Williams video in the background because you need to watch it. You need to watch for the story, watch for the, and another thing that comes to mind, which I always think about, is I was an economics major before I dropped out. Everything is supply and demand. The more you have of something, the less it's worth. And people copy the top. So when Casey Neistat and David Dobrik were at the top, everyone started making vlogs. That's when I entered. I made vlogs. Now Mr. Beast is at the top. Everyone's making Mr. Beast style videos. But basic supply and demand. The more you have of something, the less it's worth. So the more Mr. Beast-esque videos exist, the less people will want to watch Mr. Beast because it's out there so much. Basic supply and demand. And so it's interesting when I'm seeing like Sam Sulek succeed. Well, first of all, I know that there will be a wave of people who follow him, but also just basic supply and demand. You can't get that anywhere else. And even before Sam Sulek, my friend Ryan Ng was talking to me about this, and he's like, it's not that slow. I think people sometimes think, which I did myself, is like fast content succeeds and slow content doesn't. It's not that. Like audience has like YouTube has an audience of maybe over 1 billion people like have YouTube. It's like built into Google phones. Everyone at Apple gets it. And so it's like before Sam Sulek, there was people creating like woodworkers who would make 3-hour videos about building a chair, very little edits, and they would get 10 million views, but they're just not in our world, so we don't see them. And there's friggin' tribal guys who build huts in the woods getting 10 million views for a 45-minute long video. And so it's like slow content was always succeeding. It just wasn't in our world. And so it was almost like that's something that gives me hope. And even when I going back to supply and demand, when I think about podcasts, it's like 99% of podcasts are indoors, probably because podcasts rely on sound quality. And if you're outdoors, you got to worry about your environment, the weather, the sound. And trust me, I've had many issues with that, but I hope that supply and demand, very much less people are making podcasts outside. So I'm hoping it creates a higher demand, but I don't know. I just threw a lot at you.
No, yeah. I'll try and touch on all those points. So when it comes to the whole supply and demand thing, I guess that is kind of another way of thinking about the fact that, you know, with the trends and how they change.
Yeah.
And like you said, you know, Sam's doing something extremely different. You can't get that anywhere else because also Sam is a very specific type of personality, and he's very true to himself. But people will follow suit, and people will try to do what he does, and it goes in that cycle. I think another thing to talk about is the fact that while Sam is not putting out these long videos extremely frequently with the intention of, I know that will feed the YouTube algorithm, it is. Yeah. So that was something that I'm happy you touched on that. Yeah. So, and you can talk, I can say this with the word algorithm, or I can say this with audience, but the way that the algorithm works is it's not just this AI that's like going to push something because you plug in all the right bits. The algorithm is really, it reflects the audience's viewing habits, right?
Yeah.
So one, he has developed a viewership that is much more of a passive watching audience, right? They passively consume that content. Like you said, your friend, he'll produce beats just with Sam in the background. I've been even like in the gym, like not even like really like watching his content, just listening to him talk about certain things, or doing chores or whatever it may be. It really is kind of that type of podcast vibe in a way. But with his probably intention of putting out something that's a little way more authentic, he has all this watch time, right? There's these 40-minute videos, and you combine that with an audience that is passive and willing to watch through all of that really likes him for who he is, on top of the posting frequency, it's a recipe for success. So yes, that even though right now it's more, I guess, unconventional, he has probably unknowingly positioned himself in a way where he's getting pushed and out to the, homepage and getting suggested to new audiences. And so it's a perfect storm, really, I think.
Yeah. Something else I just thought about, like, so we're talking about supply and demand in terms of like YouTube content. Like, no one's making 40-minute gym videos besides him right now. But it's also supply and demand to internal value. And so I used to work for Marco, the shoe YouTuber. And what I would say is, like, it doesn't really matter if people copy him because he's such a talented artist that even if people were copying him, they couldn't recreate what he's doing because he has years of art. And so it's like, I could say the same thing for Sam Sulek. It's like, people can and will copy him and some will succeed, but his physique is so crazy.
His personality.
So like, inherently his supply and demand is more valuable just by that.
Right.
And that's something like I think about too, that I'm trying to think about thinking about myself in my personal brand is like, when I'm reading books, when I'm consuming content, when I'm waking up, attending church, every little thing that I do is a part of my personal brand. And it's not just the style videos I make, but it's who I am as a person by supply and demand. Is that inherently valuable? And that's like interesting. Even like as you, it's like the reason you're on my podcast right now is not because you personally have a big YouTube channel but I know that your knowledge, like your inherent supply and demand, is valuable. And so that's like something to think about as well.
Yeah, definitely. What you had said about the fact that, there are going to be people that follow Sam or Marco, who I've done some consulting for, actually.
Oh yeah, Marcus.
Yeah, he's great. And, those are those people are not, they're different from the norm. They act differently. They're unique, and like you said, you can't find that anywhere else. There are going to be people that try to emulate what they do, but the issue with that, and this really kind of goes back to at the very beginning when you were talking about the fact that a YouTube consultant would probably tell you, oh, you need to look at all these different podcasters and see what do they do and then implement it into your own thing. The issue at hand is people will see what they do and then try to make a copy of that for themselves. And if you're not involving your own taste, what really like lights a fire in your chest, what you're really passionate about, you're never going to be as good as the original. If you're just trying to copy paste someone's style and not transform your own content. So I think one of the keys to providing that value that no one can get anywhere else is really trying to find, like, what is that X factor? What is that thing that you have within you, something maybe you're interested about, or just something about your personality or how you talk to people and your way of engaging in conversation that is that kind of through line through your content. And then also, through the life experiences that you've had, the people that you've talked to, the content that you've consumed, ton of different things, kind of continuing to grow and build upon, that foundation.
Yeah. Such valuable advice.
Thank you. And also, like, I'm speaking from my personal experience.
Yeah.
you always have to take what everyone says with a grain of salt. Like, you know, I'm coming from one perspective, but just because, you know, the things that I'm saying, you know, I think it's very important, you know, what you hear to always, you know, not take it completely as the truth, because in life, in art, in like YouTube, for the sake of making money and having a business, like there are these, what you can say, maybe rules of thumb, but it's also important to, you know, break the mold as well. And that is what those people are doing. So
it's like, I always hear, I play chess, and they say like the best chess players know all the rules. They know all the strategies, the smart things to do, but the best chess players also know when to break them. And I think, like you said, I've heard what you said put differently, which is that if I were to try to be like Mr. Beast, you'll never be better at being Mr. Beast than Mr. Beast. So you want to be your own person. You want to be your own original. I think something else I've heard that is related is like, you can't tell stories about something you haven't experienced. So it's like, you got to go out and have life, so therefore you can tell the stories. And that's like something as a podcaster where I'm trying to be like, how do I continuously bring adventure into my life? Like this last summer, I walked 150 miles across Spain. After this podcast, I'm going to shoot up to Grand Canyon. So it's like trying to read enough, to consume enough to work on me as a person, rather than just the podcast as a business, as a personal brand.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely important. And, you know, no matter how old you are, like whether you're, you know, in this stage of our lives where there's a lot changing, a lot of new experiences, or you're 50 years old or 80 years old, you're never going to wake up the same person as you were the day before. And understanding that is important because, you know, like, you know, there is this X factor about every successful content creator, but also they continue to like grow and change, and that audience grows and changes with them. But I think walking back a little bit, everyone has that thing inside of them. Right? That unique thing. And sometimes it's not just taking in these life experiences, how in whatever shape or form, that will like kind of put those things into your own personal brand or your you know, way of being. I think it's more that those experiences bring those things out of you, right? It's always there.
That's interesting. Even from like a God perspective, like I think everyone has like an inherent value. And I think that when you talk about copying people or like being inspired by people and the experiences, it's because you inherently have value and you have a story to tell. That's the reason you have friends. Like that's the reason your family likes you and your friends like you, is because you have value. There's something exciting about you. And a lot of time it's not that experiences, like I'm just re-saying what you're saying. A lot of time it's not that experiences add this crazy value to you, but it's that experiences will break down the barriers you have. And that when you actually think that I need to make videos like Mr. Beast or Sam Sulek, what you're saying is that I'm not good enough. Like I think they would be a better version than me myself. And again, we can take it all the way back to the beginning of the podcast, like Rick Rubin said, the best indication if someone will like something else is if you like it yourself. And there's a reason you are yourself and you have a value to add to the world. And so much of that, too, even when I sit down with bigger podcast guests who have 1 million subscribers or they built a business, it's like I always try to use faith to like put myself on an even playing field. Is that, this person might have $1 million or like they might have been hanging out with Justin Bieber and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but like we're all equal in God's eyes, and therefore like I have value to add to this situation. And that's really like helped me a lot too, is just putting myself on an even playing field with everyone else.
Definitely. I agree with that for sure.
There was something I really wanted to say, and I'm blanking so hard. I know the next thing I want to talk about, but there's something more related.
Was it about what you were just saying?
Similar. Yeah, it was more similar than the topic change that I have in mind, but it's not coming to me, then I'll move on. I guess I do want to ask you on in. There's there's a wave happening on YouTube of people quitting. Why do you think that is? Why do you think so many YouTubers are quitting right at the same time right now?
I think a lot of the YouTubers that are quitting or slowing down, or, maybe they're still going to be on their channel, but they're starting to, hire other people to also be the face of their channel. I think that about how their audience is what they're expecting. That's one side of it. I think another side of it, going along with the fact that these creators have been at it for a long time, it is a very grueling job. And I say job because no matter how much you love it, you are going to be, there are going to be times, regardless of the fact that it may be your passion, that it's still work, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there comes a time, especially with people that are in the world of content creation, you can always be working on your channel, right? And I'm making an assumption here, but I think a lot of content creators don't necessarily have that balance in their life.
Yeah.
And even on the analytics side, it's gamified. Like you have all of these metrics, and if a video performs, it goes in the green. You see a little green. You either get a green check with a circle that means like it's doing average viewership, let's say, or average watch time or click through rate, or if it does really well, then it's an up arrow with a full green circle, which is that means that your video's performing greater than usual. But if it doesn't perform, that's where you see the grayed out down arrow. And so with all that, it's very easy to get kind of tied up with the never-ending cycle of trying to chase those analytics. And I'm sure there's a portion of those YouTubers that have gone burnout because of that, because they're no longer following the passion side of things, and it's more, a lot of their motivation has kind of shifted towards the side of really it being all about continuing to grow the channel, which that's why earlier I was talking about the fact that I think it is important to balance those two things. And I think expectations can be tough as well. There's a lot of pressure of continuing to upload, and there are some content creators out there that have a very small team, and they work crazy hours, and if you don't put in those boundaries, not only on the side of, okay, I'm going to give myself some time to have a break and recharge, or if you don't put in those boundaries on the side of, I'm not going to let the performance of the content dictate, one, what I think about this video and the art that I'm putting out there, and two, what I think about my self-worth, right? It's very important to separate those two things. And then I think there are also just some content creators that have checked all the boxes as far as what their goals are. They've been at it for a long time. I know that a lot of these YouTubers have been on the platform for over 15 years. So,
dude, this is the soul wealth part of the podcast. This is actually exactly what inspired me to start the podcast, because I think I'm doing a good job working on it, but I always fall back in the trap I would call the least talked about addiction of America, which is workaholism. And it's where you get your self-worth, your identity from your work. And YouTube is a very hard... So many people in America struggle with that concept that I just explained, especially in our era, because we grew up with the internet, so we're always subconsciously comparing ourselves. We have people like David Goggins who are telling you go, 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 and you're comparing yourself to everyone else, and then you tie your worth to your career, and then if your worth is tied to your career, then your worth is tied to how hard you work, and we glorify hard work, which is a good and a bad thing. And then a lot of times people will neglect their friends or family, and I did it without a thriving... I neglected my friends without making money and without a thriving YouTube channel. So it was like the worst of both worlds. But something good came from it, which is this message of soul wealth. There's so much I want to cover here, but I do want to explain the idea of this post button, which is that, like, I know I briefly covered in the beginning, but most people, especially YouTubers, but it's any artist, whether you're hitting post on a song, whether you're hitting post on a podcast, a YouTube video, whatever you're hitting post on, Instagram, TikTok, most people hit post and they're waiting to find out if they're successful. And at that point, yes, you can market the video after it comes out, and marketing is important, but at that point, you've pretty much done what you can. And so if you're waiting for outside metrics to control your internal value. You're going, based on how many streams my song gets, I will decide if it was successful. Based on if I get the green up arrow, I'll decide if it's successful. And that's what I always say is, by the time you hit post, you should know if it was a success. So for me, the first metric is, did I enjoy it? Well, I'm enjoying this conversation, so that's a check. And will this improve our relationship? I think it will, because we haven't had a conversation like this maybe ever. Mm-hmm. So then it's a success. But what I'm trying to take from you too is, like, how do I take that, like, business aspect and apply it to the before the post button, which creating the thumbnail and the title before, thinking about the topics better, thinking about the story, doing the research, like all these things I can do before the post button, and it's in my control. And that's why, like, stress and anxiety come from uncertainty. It comes from problems that you have no control over. And so that's something I think is particularly interesting. But there is a topic I do want to discuss with you, which is, I think it's so important, and it's something I'm trying to figure out. And it's not just content, it's life, it's relationships, it's everything, is the art of falling back in love. Because the same way I talked about supply and demand, the more you have of something, the less it's worth from an audience perspective. I think that's a big reason people get burnt out in their work. Because if I just started podcasts this year, then it's new, it's exciting for me. But when I'm on episode 1000, and I've been doing it for 10 years, to me, podcasts, supply and demand, I have 1,000 episodes of podcasts in my life, so therefore, they're prospectively worth less. Does that mean I should quit? No. Well, let's put it relationship-wise. What if I marry someone the first year, honeymoon, great. 10 years in, I've spent, 5,000 days with that person? Therefore, prospectively, it's not as exciting, new, or refreshing. Does that mean we should divorce? No. So it's like this art of falling back in love is something I'm obsessed with. And I don't know too much. Like, I hope to develop a really good answer of how to do so, but it's just something I'm so curious. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that, what you had talked about with, let's say, finding a partner and you get married. I'm not married. I don't have any specific perspective on that, but I do think that I can relate to that experience that many people have, where you have the honeymoon phase at the beginning. It's super exciting. And you can use that as an analogy for the other things. So honeymoon phase, super exciting. It's new, all this, opportunity. There's also uncertainty. It's very interesting. And then there comes a time where, maybe it becomes a little stale, or there's some roadblocks or whatever it may be. I think that it's important to fall in love with the process. And when I say that, I mean, your relationship with people, your relationship with your work, it is ever changing and it's always growing. Yeah. And I think being in a place of wanting to grow and improve upon the things that you can control is a sustainable way to continue to, really love what you do and love the people around you. Because if we talk about content, the issue at hand with trying to control how the audience is going to respond, I can do everything in my power from my personal knowledge and what I'm learning every day in order to try and make sure that let's say if the goal of the YouTuber is that the video performs and it gets tons of views, I can do that. But at the same time, I have to know that if the video does not get the views that we projected, at the very least, this video was better than the last video. There are specific things that you want to improve on from the last video or the last 10 videos that you could do better, and you intentionally worked at that and made sure that in your eyes it's an improvement and you're growing. So as long as that's happening in the long run, you will stay invested in what you're doing, but also, that is another measure of success. And a lot of the time it's very hard to look at one video to the next. But have you ever gone, let's say you could even do this with your camera roll. If you go back in your camera roll, like couple years and think about where you were with your headspace about, life and what your goals were and your understanding of things. And that kind of gives you perspective, like, oh my gosh, like it's insane if you stick to something like that over time, or just have faith in the fact that you're going to continue to grow and learn. And that is it's a lot easier to see the miles and miles that you've come from the beginning. So I think it's just important to stay on the path of continual growth, really.
Growth, like always learning. I think something that came to my mind that I remembered or recalled as you were speaking is the idea of potential. I think whether it be a romantic relationship, whether it be your work or whatever, I think a huge mistake people make is they fall in love with potential. So they go, oh, I could have 1 million subscribers, and that dream of 1 million subscribers keeps them going. And we know, even scientifically, they've proved that people are happier pursuing a goal than they are achieving a goal. And so it's like, it's so easy to like dream of how the video is going to perform, or how your partner's going to look, or how the relationship will be. But then when you get there, it's a disappointment. And so, but on the other hand, you want potential to be like, you want your potential to be a selling point. So when I'm selling to the audience, I don't want them to just think they're watching me now. I want them to think that one day I'm going to be a big podcaster and I'm going to have a huge audience and that I'm going to get these big guests on. I want them to believe in me the way I believe in me. But as for myself, I don't want to fall in love with potential. I want to fall in love with the process and with who I am. And that was even a mistake I made with my last girlfriend, where I'm so like addicted to like self-help and all this stuff that I was like, here, do this, like trying to like change her, where instead of just being like grateful for who she was and like enjoying the process. And so that's something like I'm really trying to apply to relationships, but even YouTube and content as well, is just like, don't fall in love with someone's potential. Like fall in love with, meet them right where they're at and like enjoy the journey together.
Yeah. The old saying that it's not about the destination.
Yeah.
It's about the journey. Yeah. And you could also say that, with the journey comes all the experiences and the growing. So it all comes together.
Even like when you said in the very beginning, like your audience grows with you. I think about people who've been on YouTube forever. So let's take the Paul brothers. Like Jake Paul and Logan Paul, I can't tell you how relevant they are based on views. Like, I don't know. I'm sure at one point they were more popping than they are now. I don't really know. They don't feel like they fall off. They feel like they've been around forever. But like since Jake Paul and Logan Paul, they've both done vlogging. They both have a podcast. They both have their own companies now. They both box, fight professionally. It's like they've gone through so many stages, and I don't know the many details of how like relevant they are, if they're doing better or the worse, but they've lived through many phases in many life, and they still have an audience. They still have fan bases, and it's like it is kind of freeing to think about that. And it's like I don't have to put all my like eggs into podcasting or vlogging, and I can grow, and it's okay to embrace change, and my audience will grow with me, and that is something that's big.
That's something that I have come to realize has become it's one reason that I am in a place where you know I can do, let's say, create content full time.
Yeah.
It's because of having that understanding of the fact that you have to be open to discovery, like whatever comes up. Like, you do have your goals and what you think you want and where you think you want you should be in the long run, but also, you know, life is full of tons of surprises. And when I first started getting into videography, at the time I was about to go to physical therapy school. I'd graduated. It was April of 2021, and I was literally about to apply.
Yeah.
In the back of my mind, I had always had this passion for videography, and I knew that was the thing that really like lit a fire in my belly, and really was something that truly made me happy. And up until the point of applying for school, that feeling had grown greater and greater, and I went through some experiences where I realized how fragile and short life is, and it really, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter about what other people think, or maybe this identity that you formed for yourself is. Like, you really truly need to be aware of what are those things that make you happy and pursue them. And so, can you cuss on this podcast?
Yeah, sure.
And so I said, fuck it. and I
probably believe it.
That's fine. And I went straight into doing freelance full time. Yeah. But at the time, I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing. There was so much to figure out. I had all these one-off projects. Nothing worked for me. And it was amazing because I was finally getting to do what I loved for a living, but it was exhausting. And so then I talked to some people that I knew that were successful in the field. They gave me the advice of, don't do all these one-off projects and just reinvent the wheel every time.
Yeah.
Find someone that you really want to work for and work in depth. Have a few clients and do a ton of work with them.
Yeah.
I had that intention, but I also had the intention of, I need to find that person. So I need to be more open to the fact that if I see someone with a camera wherever, I'm going to go talk to them, or I'm going to go to networking events. So I happened to be at a gym, and I was literally on my way out, finished my workout, and I see this kid with a camera.
Yeah.
And my first thought is, oh, look at this, vlogger in the gym, like, interesting.
Yeah.
But then I checked myself and I was like, wait, this is an opportunity. Maybe I could get like a quick little edit from him, or I don't know who this guy is, what he does. I go up to him. I asked him about what he was filming for. He's like, oh, I have this YouTube channel. I'm like finishing filming this video. I was like, oh, well, I do freelance. I'd, be happy to, if you ever need help with filming or editing, like, let's connect. And he was down, and that happened to be Brandon.
Yeah.
And because, one, I was open to that opportunity presented itself, that door was there to knock on, and I knocked on that door. I had no idea what would come from that. But, and I also wasn't in a place of, I want to get into YouTube.
Yeah.
I was just in a place of, oh, I want to do freelance videography and I want to, create videos, but I didn't know exactly what that would look like. And there was that uncertainty. And, I discovered this new opportunity, and then I really just made myself invaluable in the way that I became over time integrated in the process of coming up with the video ideas, producing, filming, editing, and strategy. But not only was it a situation where, because I was open to that, I received it, but also that experience in itself then led to the new journey of also focusing on consulting, because everything that I learned with him and being open to taking on all of that responsibility and growing has given me an opportunity to learn so much about what I'm doing now. So I think, the saying goes is that you can't connect the dots going forward. You can only connect them going backwards. And you just have to trust in
Steve Jobs.
Yes, exactly. You just have to trust in the fact that, things will work out as long as you have a healthy and open and proper perspective on the fact that, like, you don't know what you don't know, and you just have to be willing to, take in different life experiences, go with the flow, not go where the wind takes you, but have an idea of what you want. And if something's like a little off of what you had originally planned, but it really, really excites you and it's interesting, don't be afraid to take that opportunity. If it works out, that's amazing. And then that'll push you further along in your career or life or whatever your goals are. If it doesn't work out, that's a learning opportunity, and that'll push you farther forward, because the line to achieving your goals is never like this. It's like this. So you got to fill your way up too. Like, I had so many projects that I was doing with freelance where, we were talking about the audio earlier, like double checking the audio, like one where the audio was horrible, and then I never heard back from that client again. If I didn't have that experience, probably I wouldn't be farther along. So it's just important to, take every single experience, whether it's positive or negative, and use it as a building block to where you're trying to go.
Wow. Dude, that was good. That was your actual story.
Yeah.
I might put that in the beginning of the podcast. Yeah.
Well, one thing I would say after we talk about Diary of a CEO is, like, if you did want to do a little editing in your podcast, just do it at the beginning. Yeah. That could be your little intro, like a supercut.
I am going to experiment with trying to put the best moment first, or doing like a little talking intro outside of the podcast. Right now, I'm in a phase of just letting go, not being fake. It'll never be fake or like stage stuff, but I'm in a phase of letting go and experimenting, and just realizing that, like, when I hold myself to these constraints, like, even I was doing 3 guest episodes with the one solo podcast, 3 guests, 1 solo. I didn't change that format until this week. Even though I felt that I had more to add as a solo podcaster and as a teacher, I refused to change it purely because I OCD. Just being like, this is how I've done it, so this is how I should do it. And right now I'm really working on letting go and trying things. And it is really inspiring to hear you, like, talk about your plans, and even just like sacrificing your vision a little bit so that you could have a better opportunity, so that you can meet people. And I love that story of Brandon in the gym, because it's like, when you walk up to him, you don't know who he is. You're just doing it for the opportunity. It's funny because I met this guy, Sam Najad, at my gym. And when I met him, he made no content. He had no online presence. I actually think he deleted Instagram for 3 years, and then he had reopened Instagram like a month before I met him. But he was hilarious, and he wanted to be an actor, and I thought he had potential. I met him in the sauna, after we worked out a couple times, I said, bro, you should come on my podcast. I'm small, so there's no just like, hey, random dude. I thought he was really cool, really good on camera. He wanted to be an actor. And so I invited him on my podcast. Think nothing of it. Right after my podcast, he starts making content. In 3 months, he went from 0 followers on Instagram to like 150,000.
Wow, that's crazy.
Bro, he's my most popular episode on YouTube. But when I interviewed him, it was just because I thought he was funny and he was a good guy. And it turned out to be a huge episode, and the same thing for like Brandon there. And I just love hearing those stories and stuff. Future Aussie, if you're enjoying this episode, please drop a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, or leave a comment /like on YouTube. These things grow the podcast, and if you help me, then I can help make the show better and better and better for you guys. Back to the episode. I do want to ask you my outro question now, which is, from the perspective of Soul Wealth, when you die, what do you want people to say about you?
It's a big question.
Yeah. Feel free to not have the perfect answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is that answer is going to change over time. At this point in my life, I think that I want people to say that, hopefully, in the people that I directly touch, because I'm not necessarily right now making content, but the people that I know around me were inspired to pursue their passions, because that, it's definitely, I love seeing when my friends also say F it, and they go and like really dive into something that they want to do that's going to make them happy. I definitely want people to say that I was trustworthy and a man of my word. That's a big one. And then I think one just overarching thing that I hope people will say is that I made them smile.
Yeah. Well, dude, I mean, first of all, when I met Brandon, sorry, not Brandon. Oh, I did meet Brandon, and I met Blake at Vid Summit. And definitely at that time, I can't remember, was that like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago? I really don't know. So much has happened in my life.
Yeah, I think it was around a little over, or it was probably around a year and a half.
Yeah. But even myself as a creator, internally, I was a little bit more insecure. I was willing to take those risks, willing to talk to strangers, but you guys were so inviting to me. I mean, you followed up and got lunch with me. I didn't have any value, no subscribers, no nothing, but you just poured so much into me. And I remember leaving that dinner with you at UGC and being like, dude, I have so much value and information. I didn't know what to do with it, but now I get to share it with the world. So huge. I got a smile on my face, dude.
Hell yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, appreciate you having me on. That was a great talk.
Yes, great talk. All right, guys. Out.